Hello everyone and welcome back to my latest video. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into some of the most unique tanks of the interwar period, the T-35, T-28 and A1E1 Independent. These tanks were notable for their multi-turreted designs, which presented a number of challenges both in terms of manufacturing and operation. Despite these difficulties, the T-28, T-35 and A1E1 were important forerunners of some of the tanks that would dominate the battlefields of World War II. So let's take a closer look at some of these forgotten giants and discover what made them so unique. The A1E1 was a British multi-turreted design hailing from the early 1920s. It was one of the largest and most complex vehicles ever built, with 5 turrets weighing over 40 tons in total. It had a 3-pounder 47mm gun in its main turret, and the 4 others each had a machine gun. They were placed one on each corner of the tank to hopefully cover each angle that infantry could approach from. Despite these impressive specifications, it never saw active service, as it was plagued with loads of mechanical problems, such as the rather unfortunate ability to almost break in half when it was trying to turn a corner, due to it being too long for its width. Whilst the A1E1 never saw active service, its design had a significant impact on the development of the Soviet T-28 tank. Soviet engineers were able to obtain detailed plans for the A1E1 through espionage and used them as the basis for the T-28's multi-turreted design. The T-28 was a medium tank, weighing over 30 tons, and it had 3 turrets, each in a line. The 3 featured different weapons, with the primary one having a 76.2mm gun, similar to the one found on early T-34s. It was one of the most heavily armoured tanks of its time, and it was well suited for the Soviet Union's doctrine of massed armour attacks. The T-28 saw extensive service during the early years of World War II and helped to establish the Soviet Union as a major military power. Developed from the T-28 as well was the T-35. It was to complement it well, this one being much heavier, larger and more cumbersome than the T-28, and it had even more turrets, the same number and orientation as on the A1E1. Due to its size, it suffered from a number of design flaws that limited its effectiveness in combat. The tank was slow and difficult to manoeuvre, and its multiple turrets made it hard to coordinate and control in battle. Additionally, the T-35 was vulnerable to enemy fire and was often targeted by German anti-tank guns and aircraft due to its large size and slow speed, making it an easy target. Overall, it was an ambitious attempt to create a powerful tank, but in the end it was too large and unwieldy to be an effective weapon in the highly mobile combat of the early parts of Operation Barbarossa, and it was phased out of combat soon after it entered. The use of multiple turrets on tanks like the A1E1, T-28 and T-35 offered a number of benefits on the battlefield. Firstly, it allowed the tank to engage multiple targets at once, increasing its firepower and versatility. Each turret could theoretically be used to target a different enemy tank or fortification, which would, in theory, make it much more effective in combat. In addition to this, it would require more crew, which would mean there were more pairs of eyes scanning the surrounding area to look for threats. And say there was some infantry approaching, a man in a machine gun turret could quickly turn it to face them and mitigate the threat before it even became too dangerous. Finally, the use of multiple turrets helped to compensate for the limitations of some of the early tank guns, some of which were quite slow to reload, and the turrets didn't have the best traverse mechanisms like they do nowadays, so they would have taken a while to turn around. By having multiple guns, the tank could continue to engage the enemy even if one was out of action. Overall, the use of multiple turrets was a relatively important innovation in tank design and did help to shape the development of armoured warfare. One disadvantage, however, is that having multiple turrets made the design infinitely more complicated. One turret is bad enough, having to make a perfect circle and balance it so that the turret can spin freely, but doing it 4 or 5 times on one tank, and some of the turrets having to be quite small so they could all fit, was an engineering and logistical nightmare. They were also difficult to maintain, which increased the cost and time required to produce each tank. In addition, using multiple turrets made all of these vehicles very big, very heavy, and consequently very slow, making them very easy targets in battle, and also being very difficult to transport and manoeuvre. This could be a significant disadvantage in some areas with difficult terrain or limited infrastructure, i.e. Finland in the Winter War. The final problem, and probably the most significant, is the burden that was placed on the tank commander, who was responsible for coordinating the actions of each turret and directing the tank's overall strategy. This required a high degree of skill and concentration at the best of times in a standard tank, but with multiple turrets, the commander had to keep track of multiple targets and prioritise the actions of each turret, which was pretty much impossible without radios and computer systems nowadays. Additionally, the use of multiple turrets could create communication difficulties between the commander and the other members of the tank crew, as each turret required a separate communication channel. This could make it difficult for the commander to coordinate the actions of the tank crew and respond effectively to changing battlefield conditions. Overall, whilst the use of multiple turrets offered some advantages in combat, it also placed a significant burden on the tank commander and required a high degree of skill and coordination to be effective. So overall, multiple turrets on a tank might not be the best idea. Nowadays, with computer systems and AIs that can automatically target things, they might be decent. But seeing as single turret tanks are the norm nowadays, they might not. One useful thing that they did do, however, was pave the development for some of the other more famous multiple weapon tanks in the Second World War. The first of these is the Shah-B, but you also get the feature on things like the Churchill and the M3 Lee. That's having multiple guns in the same tank, but only one turret. Take the Lee, for example. That had a 75mm gun mounted in a sponson in its hull, and a 37mm anti-tank gun in the turret. With the hull gun only pointing forward, the commander wouldn't have to worry about which direction it was facing, like on a tank like the A1E1, where the machine guns could all be in different directions. If he needed to engage fortifications or fire an effective high explosive shell, then he pretty much just had to aim the tank and fire that, whilst the turret could be used, just like a normal tank, to engage other enemy armour. Overall though, multi-turreted tanks weren't the best idea. If anyone would like to add something, then you're welcome to leave a comment below, but thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.